Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. My name is Danny Bossa. I'm joined today with a very special guest. He's a great close friend of our great close friend, Dr. Eric Serrano, and a business partner of his as well for Infinity Fitness. Please welcome Scott Mendelson. How are you, Scott?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So we've talked a little bit offline. Maybe you can share with the viewers what it is you do, and then we can start hitting some topics.
Welcome to this channel. I am Dr. Steven de Vos, the lifting dermatologist, and this is my bro science hunting partner Danny Bossa. If you want to learn more about the most cutting-edge science-based information in the world of hormone optimization, please like and subscribe.
Click the bell button to get notified.
I also invite you to join my other YouTube channel, The Lifting Dermatologist. The link you can find in the description of this video.
For 21 years, I've been helping people, men and women, improve their quality of life, body composition, and performance, through personalized programs and supplementation, advice. And I'm very fortunate that, I work with Dr. Eric Serrano, MD, here in Columbus, Ohio, and I've known him about 22 years. And I'm constantly learning from him. He sends me many of his patients where he may be, doing TRT treatments with his patients or may not, and say, I want you to build their training nutrition programs with these parameters, and then we monitor, both of us monitor, that patient and see how they're progressing. Of course, he's looking at blood work and many other things. So he's always making different refinements on the programs, but we work together with a lot of clients in that way. Him and I train together, when I can nail him down, which is a constant laboratory of experimentation and madness, people screaming at each other. Occasionally we get visits from patients who are just utterly shocked about how this 57-year-old man, Dr. Serrano, can be very intense, doesn't do a lot of sets, be very intense, and, has a great amount of strength and lives a very high quality of life, practices, what he preaches. But I get all kinds of emails and communication with people all over the world. So I get a good sense of what hot topics are, solving problems, answering questions, and people can email me directly, scott@infinityfitness.com. I'm very accessible. And again, I'm all about helping people improve their quality of life with proven methods that I've built based on, many years of practical experience, trial and error.
Very good. So one of the things we talked about is kind of a big thing going on now on the social media is this Netflix movie, The Game Changers. We just talked briefly offline about that. So what are your thoughts? I think the majority of people I've seen kind of think it's a little bit of nonsense, but there are some people that are, they said, yes, I've been doing this for a long time and my life is great. What's your position on this?
Over the last several months and recently, these last couple of weeks, I've gotten a lot of emails from people, phone calls saying, hey, what do you think of this movie? And what do you think of the vegetarian approach? My first question to them is, what are you trying to do? And usually it's, I want to lose fat, gain muscle, and improve energy. And then my response is, then a vegetarian or a vegan diet is not the way to go. That's going to send you in the wrong direction. And it pisses a lot of people off. But I don't care, because I'm going to tell the truth based on, my experience. That particular movie seems to have a pretty big agenda. There's some questions as to the people that are making it. What investments do they have in vegetarian food companies? What's really their agenda? But if you're wanting to naturally optimize your testosterone levels, then you need saturated fat intake. And that comes from primarily animal protein. And definitely I would prefer organically raised protein sources. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I think that there could be a small percentage of the overall population that responds very well to a vegetarian approach. And they consume protein from fish and eggs and seafood. That's one camp. I've seen that work well. Also, they tend to need to be very, very sharp with supplementation to make up for a lot of deficits in the diet in terms of vitamins. Also, I think amino acid supplementation is very important for that group, and essential fats. But in terms of the straight vegan approach, where they're very limited their protein sources, very rarely do I see that work at all.
Okay. And the other thing I found interesting with that video was they weren't really exploring anything from the other camp, from the other side, and say, well, this is their position, let's explore this, and this is the vegan position, and then maybe you can come to your own conclusions. It was just very much focused only on one side, without any mention of the other.
Here's an interesting one, and I heard this years ago. Someone said, well, gladiators ate a vegetarian diet. They ate grain. Well, gladiators were slaves. I don't think a lot of people know that. It's not like they were, athletes of today making millions of dollars and had this, huge public persona and could do whatever they wanted. They were very popular in, I guess, ancient civilizations, like, the Roman Empire, but they were slaves and they were fed with stuff that was cheap. And from a few different researchers over time, what I've heard is one of the reasons they gave them grain is because it made them fat and they had more body fat so they could withstand the gladiator matches with, different strikes in terms of swords, blades, whatever, so they wouldn't bleed out as quickly. So that does make sense. It's probably something they realized. But anybody who's thinking, oh, well, a gladiator ate grain and they were in great health, and that's why they did it. That's complete nonsense. I mean, you look at the movies and there's people in good shape. Probably not how they looked. They probably had a very difficult life. They didn't live very long. So, that's one example of just, kind of twisting some facts to fit your agenda, because they didn't eat grain out of choice. They would have liked to have a broader diet. They ate that because it was cheap and they were slaves.
That's kind of the one thing that's always kind of struck me is whenever anybody mentions, well, our ancestors ate this way and humans from 10,000 years ago ate this way. And, guys from 1,000 years ago ate this way. And I'm like, but they didn't live very long. Number one, we don't really know how healthy they were or how strong they were, and just because they were eating that way back then, maybe it's just based on the fact that that's what they had available to them and they just kind of learned to thrive. It doesn't necessarily mean if they had some of the stuff that we had available today that they wouldn't have been in way better health. So I always find it difficult to take the position of that's the way our ancestors ate, so that's the way I should be eating today.
One of the things I think we can logically take from our history is, one, that we were not designed to eat refined food. We know that, genetically, I don't know what the exact statistic is, but our digestive systems have not evolved tremendously from now back, let's say 1,000, 10,000 years ago. And certainly then they did not have supermarkets. They did not have refined foods. They did not have trans fats and all of these things. So I think we can use a logical standpoint as, one, we didn't eat a lot of refined foods. Two, we did not eat 6 times a day, back 1,000 years ago. And that's one that Dr. Serrano points to very often, is eating a high meal frequency is not necessarily a good idea for a lot of people. It can cause some problems. So we can take that from our history, but, they ate what they had available. And certainly they went long periods without eating food at all, based on disasters or war or famine, other things, that are going on. And truly, what were the records? How do we know what they ate? Did they have meal plans they put on a digital file that they left us to open? So there's a lot of questions about that. And a lot of it was regional too. I mean, people ate differently in different parts of the world. I think that definitely makes sense.
So how do we go about determining what is the best way of with our current physiology, meal frequency and all this kind of thing?
So I'm asked this very often, is how do I build a plan in terms of nutrition to help somebody lose body fat and gain muscle? And this is more particular to men. And during that process, they're trying to naturally optimize testosterone as well. One, I don't think eating 6 meals a day is an optimal way to go. I think probably at the most, it's probably 4. And in many cases, I'm using some sort of fasting protocol. I like to call it flexible fasting because intermittent fasting has taken on a lot of different definitions. But if someone's fasting from a period of, let's say, anywhere from 12 to 16 hours, let's say 16 hours, they have an 8-hour eating window. Eating maybe 4 times or 3 times during that window seems to work very well for gaining muscle, and losing body fat at the same time. I think that I've been doing that long enough to know that works very well for a large majority of people. And if initially there's some struggles with it, it's usually because the person's blood sugar is such a mess and there's so many problems from their poor diet that it's just taking the body some time to acclimate. And that's something that people need to take better note of. I think you and I talked about this briefly as it relates to a vegetarian diet before we started recording, is that if you have a terrible diet, a lot of refined foods, a lot of junk food, a lot of alcohol, trans fats, fried foods, go down the list, and then you clean up your diet and do anything that removes those things, you're going to feel better, at least for a while. So the question I have for people is, you've got to initially give a program a chance to work. And then how do you feel 2 or 3 months down the road? And that really tells you, is this the type of approach that's a good long-term approach, for you, looking at your quality of life, your body composition, your daily energy, your recovery, from training as well. So that's on the meal frequency. 2, refined foods just don't work well for people. I don't think we have the digestive capacity to deal with it. Some people in the population are genetically gifted. They can get away with it. Most people not. Eliminating trans fats, soybean oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil. There's another one. And any of these kind of fake fats, that are in a lot of foods is a good move. And it's hard, in the US, for example, canola oil's in just about everything. And I don't know why. I don't know why it's attractive to the food manufacturers. But, when avoiding those things, it has a distinct impact on lowering body fat. And I have to ask Dr. Serrano, but I'm going to guess that he has some research that would say a large consumption of corn oil, foods fried in corn oil, soybean oil, and canola oil may result in lower testosterone levels. I'm not sure of that, but probably there's some research out there to suggest it. Certainly I've seen it when, I have a client that, cleans up the diet, follows these rules in addition to others. Then 3 or 4 months later, they do their blood work and their testosterone levels without doing any TRT are better. And there could be a lot of factors that contribute to it, but I believe removing the bad fats is definitely one that contributes heavily, to that improvement.
One of the interesting things I noticed, you're talking about soybean oil and stuff. We've got a 6-month-old, and we just recently switched him over to formula because he was becoming a bit of a difficult eater. And we've gone through, I don't know how many different types of formula. And one of the first ingredients, I think it's always in the top 3, is soybean oil. Mm-hmm. In every single one we find. And it's like, we're already filling up babies with soy.
There's a big commercial interest there in the US. I don't know about Canada. In the US, soybeans are easy to grow. They're very profitable. And that also fits this vegetarian diet agenda because let's say like this, Beyond Meat or, these other, what do you call them, fake meats or imitation meats that are actually vegetarian, they contain a lot of soy. Well, guess what? People are growing that and they're making money. Soy is something they give pigs to make them fat. Interesting fact. I think there's also perhaps some estrogen increasing impacts of soy, which are not good for men or females, in increasing estrogen levels. And I don't have the research in front of me, but that's one. I don't think as much soy as people are eating is a good idea. And the fact that it's in formula bothers me. That's, it's not supposed to be there. I don't believe. I don't think there's any soy in breast milk.
No, no, right. It's not. Even those little, never know how to pronounce them. Those soybeans, when you go to the sushi place, you get the edamame,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Edamame. I've done this test on 4 different occasions and I always have the same result. I'll eat a whole whack of them. And I've got very mild gyno that I had pre-TRT, just a little lump. And if I eat a bunch of those within a day or 2, that thing just swells and swells and swells.
Interesting.
So I know that it's wreaking havoc with my hormone balance. So what are some of the things that you're telling your clients in regards to, best practices, like more than just, cut out the obvious, cut out the refined foods. And I don't think our digestive systems are ever really going to adapt to process, junk.
In terms of training, here's the big one for people that are naturally trying to optimize their testosterone or people who are using TRT and trying to maximize their results. Quit overtraining. And overtraining is a big problem. It's been going on for a long time because Joe Average is looking at videos by the genetic elite or people using a tremendous amount of different substances and thinking they can use that same training volume, and they can't. It should really be a quality over quantity approach. And if your workout is not extremely challenging in terms of the sets you do, you are taking the wrong approach. So Dr. Serrano and I are constantly working with different methodologies, things that he creates in his mind and that we test that are very highly intense. and not doing a lot of sets. And I've seen this over and over again, where I take a new client who was doing workouts that are 2 hours, and I cut them down to an hour or less, and they're going to make much better progress. And by virtue of that, we're improving their intensity. We're using different methodologies to increase the length of the sets. We're using efficient supersets and short rest periods. Very rarely do I see people who would not benefit from increased intensity and less volume. So what I tell a lot of people is, if you're flirting with overtraining, you're never going to earn a great result. And a lot of people don't realize is that, the testosterone to cortisol ratio is very important around training. And if my volume's too high, if my recovery suboptimal, then it is going to depress, the, let's say, natural benefits of my testosterone levels. So why do that? Why not be more efficient and more intense and leave your comfort zone? And people can see a lot of videos that we've done on my website, infinityfitness.com, or on our YouTube channel. I mean, you can watch Dr. Serrano. He's 57 years old. He does not use TRT. And he gets after it, and a lot of times people come and visit us and they say, wow, that's a lot harder than what I usually do. And people need to kind of wake up and leave their comfort zone and embrace new levels of intensity with the proper form, of course, to avoid injury. But a lot of people kind of just go through the motions in the gym, and they go too long, and it's a big mistake.
And would you, there's some guys will say, I'll blast my chest and back once a week, and we'll do that once a week. Or other guys are saying I'll hit each body part twice a week. I'll just do less sets. I'll hit them twice a week. Is there an optimal training frequency per body part, so to speak? Or
I think that training a body part once in a 7-day period is good for most people. There are some people, for genetic reasons, that can recover faster, that may be able to benefit from a higher frequency, but I think that's pretty rare. I would say that if they're able to train their chest, for example, twice a week, their intensity may be low because they're kind of subconsciously in survival mode, where it's like, well, let's not push this too hard because this muscle is going to be trained again 3 or 4 days later. I tend to, build workouts where they're hitting a muscle probably once a week. Now, of course, your shoulders could be used, in different, movements. I mean, for example, you're going to use, your shoulder somewhat when you're, using chest horizontal or incline pressing. So it's not complete isolation, but I think once a week is best for most people. And they kind of have, again, this bodybuilding attitude they've seen on the internet. Well, this person's training multiple times a week. Well, great. Maybe that's proven to work well for them, but that's not what I see working well for real people. Again, people who are using TRT, people who are not using TRT, I work with both, and they need a distinctly different approach in terms of volume based on their recovery capacity. But I'm going to say that for 90% of people, at least, training a body part once a week is adequate. They're going to make great results with that if they're using the right, program strategies.
Okay. And you're not necessarily condoning, what's called the bro split, where, I train chest on Monday and back on Tuesday and so on and so forth. Is it that type of thing, or is it more, it's going to be compound, it's going to be a mix, it's going to be?
I think the most benefits come from training chest and back together because they're antagonistic body parts. Another day where you're doing lower body, where it's primarily quads, hamstrings, hips, glutes. And then another day where shoulders, biceps, triceps, forearm work, is in another. And then I usually do another day that's dedicated to core training with clients. And I may also have them do fat burning intervals on that day as well. But probably 5 total exercise sessions per week for most of the men who are trying to lose body fat, gain muscle, and improve quality of life. And that's typically 3 weight training, 1 core, and then 2 fat burning interval sessions in that 5 session period within a 7-day week. And again, you're combining one of the interval days with the core training, and that's very efficient. Because, one of the things that I find is what a lot of the people that gravitate towards me are pretty successful people, whether they're lawyers, doctors, different practitioners. They don't have a lot of time, to do different things. They have family obligations, professional obligations. So if I can help them be more time efficient, that improves their quality of life. And by virtue of that, they're going to get a better result. That's one of my priorities. Now, if it's somebody who's, younger or doesn't have a lot of these obligations, can they afford to do more with training? Probably. And their recovery scenarios are better because they don't have, a wife that may be, pulling them away from a lot of things or causing stressors in a relationship, or kids that take a lot of resources, as you know. So it depends, on the situation, but doing as little as possible with high intensity and getting the result that you want is the way to go to avoid overtraining and also to reduce the risk of injury.
Okay. So for the training side, I think that's pretty clear. And I think everyone will get that, for, like you're saying, precisely what you're saying, and just focus more on the intensity and less on the number of sets.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty clear. So what do you, for the general population, and you were mentioning earlier, you said the nutrition side of thing more geared towards men. Would you say that there's a difference when it comes to women, what you would suggest to them?
Women are more sensitive to calorie count. Men are not. And this is one of the questions that drives me crazy from people. How many calories should I eat? Well, I mean, that's one factor of the many. Caloric intake, again, is one factor of many. What you also have to consider is, what are the macronutrient percentages? What are the food choices? What foods does that individual person respond well to, or what do they respond poorly to? Is that person using fasting? What is their activity level? So the answer is, you don't know an exact number of calories that's appropriate for a new client on day one. It's something you have to determine based on looking at their nutrition records and seeing how they're feeling. And a lot of people are very, well, they know if I got to gain muscle, I need to be in a surplus. And if I want to lose body fat, I need to be in a deficit. Not necessarily. And, I know there's a lot of nutritionists that say, well, that's wrong. You're wrong. I'll tell them right now, this is something that Dr. Serrano has done in many, many seminars, and it really gets people pissed off. He says, all you nutritionists, raise your hand. And they raise their hands. And he says, got a question for you. What's the difference between 100 calories of broccoli and 100 calories of Lucky Charms cereal? Okay, in terms of how it impacts the body. They're both carbohydrate. What's the difference? And many of the nutritionists will say, well, they're the same. They have the same number of calories and they're both carbohydrate. His response would just be shaking his head and say, you're wrong. They're going to create a completely different response as it relates to hormones, how the body responds to those foods, because refined foods are irritants and allergens for a lot of people. So, calories are not the overriding, factor. I think people need to focus more on the combinations of foods, the sources of foods, and have some impact on the amount. But I can tell you, I've had a lot of clients, males in particular, that eat a tremendous amount of calories and are able to lose body fat. And it's because they're feeding the natural anabolic engine. They have a good lifestyle, and they're making overall good choices. Women tend to be more sensitive to calories. They can't eat as much as men, and certainly that is relative to their lean body mass. And it is tougher for women to overcome a lot of the hormonal barriers as they're getting into different cycles, and other problems with that. I find that many women have damaged their metabolisms because they've undereaten for a long period of time. So let me give you an example of something from, yesterday. I had a client that I've been working with for a while, and his wife's not in good shape. He wants to know, how do I approach her to start making some of these changes, because things you've done for me have worked really well, and what she's doing doesn't work. He told me what she's doing, and she's consumes like some yogurt diet she saw in a magazine, and yogurt is not good for anyone, by the way. Very rarely do people thrive on that amount of dairy, and they're full of sugar, and they see these other women on commercials like, well, it must be good for me. It's like, no, they're trying to sell you a product. And anyway, what I told him is have her start eating, in a similar manner to you. That way you're only cooking one meal, focusing on good food sources, an appropriate meal frequency, get her off a lot of the, dairy and the soy she's been eating, and she'll start to see some improvement. And then you start to make some refinements from there, because I find that a lot between clients. The husband starts to make progress, gets in better shape, and all of a sudden the wife's kind of wondering what he's up to. Like, why are you getting in good shape? Are you planning to look for somebody else? In some cases, the answer is yes. You wouldn't believe what some of the clients tell me. I'm like, I can't wait to get in great shape. I can't wait to get away from this woman who's been literally killing me for years with her attitude and this or that. She wants me to be fat so she can keep control over me. And certainly I don't advocate for them to, leave their partner or whatever, but it happens a lot. It can create a lot of tension. And in most cases, though, the husband will tell the wife, well, I'm doing these good things. You should try them too. Talk to Scott. He can help you. And they're both going on a good line to get better, and things start to get better for both of them. And that's a great thing, for me. Certainly I don't get in the middle of their fights or anything. I just give advice on nutrition and training. But it's something you got to consider. Is your spouse helping you or hurting you? And how do you get them on the same page so both of you can do well? And sometimes it's not an easy conversation.
Gotcha. So let's say if we're going to focus more on the men, this channel is probably maybe
Right.
a little bit more geared towards men than women. There are quite a few women that visit, but what would you say are kind of some general guidelines as to things guys can start today in changing their diet? You were saying, don't eat so often, maybe use a little bit of timed fasting. I would imagine that would be in the morning. So I'll use an example. A guy like myself, I work from home. I've got a home gym. I'll tend to wake up early. I'll have a workout in the morning before I do anything else. Very often I'll do the workout before I even ate anything. I'll just have some water, maybe a little bit of juice, and I go do my workout, and then it's work till whatever time. I frequently end up missing a lot of meals during the day because I'm just breaking my head over stuff with work. So, so let's say a guy like me, you wake up in the morning, you're going to train, you're going to go to work, which I think a lot of guys do. What would be some guidelines in regards to that? Nutrition, timing, types of food they should be eating, stuff they should be avoiding.
If they're trying to lose body fat and gain muscle, I do like them training, fasted before training. I will have them do some things in supplementation. One of a couple of creations that Dr. Serrano scientifically engineered are the 100% MR and the muscle synthesis powder. They are both amino acid blends that have some very specific scientific engineering on their ratios based on many years of successful research. So I would have a client use those before and after training, which is very important for protecting hard-earned muscle, improving performance, accelerating recovery, helping the body to utilize more stored fat as fuel, and laying the perfect raw material foundation for muscle growth. So I'd have them do that. I would have them eat within an hour following training, and that could be leaner protein sources because you want faster utilization. For example, cage-free eggs, cage-free chicken, fish, seafood. Those things work very well because they're quickly absorbed. I would have a high amount of monounsaturated fat from extra virgin olive oil and avocados, for example. Sometimes I might use some raw nuts without any added oils. And depending on the person and what their tolerance is, I might include some carbohydrate. That could be from, rice or potatoes are very good sources that most people respond well to. Some people respond very well to fruits. And anytime somebody's consuming carbohydrate in a meal, I also include the alpha omega M3, which is an essential fatty acid complex that Dr. Serrano designed. And that does a very good job of optimizing insulin sensitivity and also driving carbohydrate into hungry muscles instead of spilling over into fat cells. So that approach works really well. I do like people training first thing in the morning. It tends to be a time where they don't have a lot of interruption, requires a lot of discipline. Their energy's good. Their focus is good. It takes them a while to acclimate to, but I do think that's a very good habit. I do not like dairy-based whey and casein shakes. And again, this is something that pisses a lot of people off because it's like, well, it's easy for them to do. I've done this for years and this or that. And there's research behind whey and casein. Okay, great. Well, here's some other practical research for you, is that the highly concentrated dairy proteins make most people bloat, causes all kinds of issues with food allergies, irritations, and intolerances. Take your pick. And people have sluggishness, joint pain, stomach upset, and things like that. But it tastes good. I've got the creamy vanilla, but it makes my stomach hurt for hours or makes me feel sluggish. Then that's not a good compromise. It's the dairy, dumbass. I mean, it's like I have these issues with people. It's like, well, I've used that for years. Well, the body has built an irritation to it because it's been consumed so often. So this happens a lot as I get rid of whey and casein and bars containing a lot of the dairy proteins, and people instantly feel better. Their body composition almost instantly improves. They have less problems with, stomach cramps and joint pain, right? But that's one thing I wanted to make clear is that dairy proteins, I don't see working very well for men, especially for men over 35. My theory is that at age 35, there starts to be a decline in natural digestive enzyme levels, and people just can't process things as well. So that's one thing people would do to help themselves. Get rid of the dairy protein from the bars and the shakes, and you should see some good improvement just by doing that and replacing that with organic food sources.
And this would include even just straight up milk, cheese.
High percentage of the population doesn't do well with them. Some people do. I have some clients that tolerate dairy pretty well from real food, like milk or cheese. But I would say that's a smaller percentage. I'm going to guess maybe 20%. Do well with that. So I might include those. And I might include, cheese that has a high saturated count, like an organic type of cheese, like once or twice a week, because it can be a good way to deliver a lot of naturally anabolic dietary fat sources, but probably not on a regular basis, daily for a lot of people.
For the people that are just using the example we used about the guys that train in the morning, I've kind of gotten mixed reports. Some guys say I train in a completely fasted state. I won't have anything but water before. And other guys say that they like to have some quickly absorbed carbs, even just like an orange juice or pre-workout or whatever. Would you say it's just best to just be like purely fasted?
If you're trying to maximize body fat loss, yes. If it's somebody where performance is their top priority and gaining muscle, then I would probably have a combination of some quickly absorbed carbohydrates, dietary fats, and proteins at the same time. That could be nuts or, something else small. You're limited. You're not going to eat a steak right before training, right? That's a hard thing to break down that quickly. But, for the clients that are needing to maximize muscle mass, I'll find something they can tolerate really well, that they can eat approximately maybe 45 minutes to an hour before training. But when you're training first thing in the morning, and you're already training at 6, I mean, you're not going to get up at 4, right? So you got to be realistic in terms of the time window. So that's how I would divide that up. And the post-workout meal will probably be a little bit bigger for somebody trying purely to gain, lean muscle mass, as well. I probably would use more carbohydrate. I'd probably try to make the meal a little bit larger overall, but have, still a good balance between dietary fat, protein, and carbohydrate.
Okay. So you primarily design a training regimen for your clients and a nutrition regimen. Is there anything outside of that you do as well, or is that pretty much the core?
Yeah, I'll do fat burning interval programs for them as well, functional training, and I like the relationship between all of the different phases because they're kind of built on the same platform, right? You got to have a nutrition program that supports your training, and if that's not in a good relationship, you're going to have a problem. So coordinating those together as well, making sure all the volume is balanced. I had somebody approach me the other day who's a CrossFit athlete, and they do it because they compete, and they asked me to do training and nutrition. Well, the difficult part of that is the CrossFit has these constantly changing training during the course of the week based on their workout of the day. Well, I've got to account for that in the overall volume. So what I do is give them complementary training to fix weaknesses, to fix muscle imbalances that may come from, different types of CrossFit training and so forth. But I've got to take that into account. Just an example where I've got to customize a lot of things. Nutrition wise, a lot of the CrossFit people, subscribe to a kind of paleo approach. In general, I think it's good. But one of the things that you'd be interested to know is that people who are using a keto approach or carnivore approach, there's going to be a time period where they're going to run into a wall because we don't need a lot of carbohydrate, but we do need some. As Dr. Serrano puts it very often, it's like adding carbohydrates, like adding a log to the fire in terms of making it burn more fat. So I do like periodically including carbohydrate, and that's kind of a fight I have with some of the CrossFit people, is that when they come to me, they've been eating no carbohydrate for years. And that's a mistake. There needs to be some, and usually it needs to be post-workout, and that will improve their recovery, improve their performance, improve their body composition fairly quickly. One of the things that I think I'm well known for and trying to explain to people is macronutrient cycling is important. So you can't eat the same things all the time, every day in the same proportions. Otherwise, the body's going to get stale. There needs to be strategic rotations, at least a couple times a week, of dietary fats, protein, and carbohydrate to prevent metabolic staleness, to increase fat burning enzymes, to naturally increase muscle building enzymes, to naturally optimize, fat burning hormones, and naturally anabolic hormones, all together. And I think that's an area where a lot of very disciplined people get themselves into trouble. They eat the same things every day, right? They're very disciplined. They hit their macros and whatever, great. But you got to insert some variety and plan for that too. That's one of the first things that I do with new clients is insert macronutrient cycling, and that brings upon a much better result for somebody who has the basics down very quickly.
Okay. So what's the procedure if somebody wanted to reach out to you? They'll email you, scott@infinityfitness.com.
Yep.
What is the typical thing that occurs? You guys have a chat by phone or by email?
Yeah, we could by phone or email. First thing I'm going to know is, what are the goals? What's the time period you want to achieve them? What's going on now? And, get an idea for what they're needing and how I can help them. I can't help everybody. I had somebody call me the other day and he said, I need to lose 50 pounds in 2 months. I said, I'm not going to do it with me. You can't. I told him it's not going to happen. I said, now, if you had a longer period, it's possible. He says, well, such and such person told me I can. I said, well, go work with them. But, I don't give unrealistic expectations to people. Now, people can earn some very aggressive results. Certainly, I've done that well for people. But I think one of the things in our society where people are completely backwards is they think they can gain all of these results overnight when they've been abusing their body for years. No, it takes time to shift metabolic and hormonal momentum, correct all kinds of things. So you can feel better pretty quickly by making good changes to diet and training and supplementation. But in terms of how quickly your body comp changes, well, how big a hole are you in? How screwed up are your fat cells and your hormones? So it's not necessarily an overnight process. So I like to tell people very often that, it could be the second or even third month of a program where you start to see faster results than the first. And that's a good sign. That the body's, responding very well. But I get people signed up, then I send them a questionnaire, collect a lot of information about them, their histories and so forth, and then follow up with different questions that are important to make sure I'm understanding all the elements, and build the personalized programs, help them implement them, and monitor them, throughout the process. And I think that's a little bit different than most. It seems that a lot of online trainers, which, hey, I'm sure there's some very good ones, but it seems that most of them are kind of handing out generic programs over and over again and don't really do anything with refinements or follow-up support. That's not me. I want to hear from clients weekly, at the least, and see what they're doing with training, with nutrition, what kind of problems they're running into, what things can I help solve for them. So I'm very interactive with clients, and I've had, a very good track record now over 21 years. And helping people in all sorts of different situations, again, improve quality of life and, body composition. I'm very proud of that. A lot of them are Dr. Serrano's patients. So he does a lot of great things for them as well, especially people and all kinds of with unique challenges. I mean, that's what he's doing now is he likes a good challenge. So he's seeing a lot of people with all sorts of different complicated, matters, and he creates great outcomes for them. So again, that's a constant area of learning that I'm able to take advantage of different things that I'm learning from how he's helping, patients and so forth.
Yeah, I definitely feel honored to consider the man a good friend of mine. He's unique. He's the closest thing to a real world Dr. House that I've ever
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Certainly, I've seen him in patient rooms where he's told people things they don't want to hear. But he is very unique in that he looks at an outside the box approach to help people, because his top priority is the patient outcome. His top priority is not satisfying the bureaucracy in terms of, well, traditionally things are done this way or that way. That's not what he's going for. He's, trying to figure out what is the best outcome for the patient. And he focuses a tremendous amount on nutrition. In the US, I would say not all doctors, but very few are focusing on nutrition. They have a very short amount of time with patients in the room. And that's because of the insurance companies have really screwed up medicine, because they put so much pressure on doctors financially. And, doctors have very little time. So what can they do? Well, in many cases, they have to prescribe medications. Otherwise, there could be malpractice issues. And this is a very litigious society. I don't think Canada's like that in terms of like everybody dropping lawsuits at the, just like snapping their fingers, right?
No.
It's different there. But in the US, it's like you make a misstep and somebody thinks they have a problem. It could be completely nonsense. They're dropping lawsuits. And that takes up a lot of doctors' time. And it also, I think, prevents them from thinking outside the box because they're like, well, do I really want to go this way? Because I could take on some scrutiny and get sued, even though it's in the best interest of the patient. And that's tremendously tragic. That doctors' first priority can't be patient care. Their first priority is satisfying insurance bureaucracy, and other nonsense. It's not a good use of their time. So Dr. Shawnigan is completely different. He spends a lot of time with patients. Sometimes appointments are an hour or longer, and he's asking them all kinds of questions and, seeing them often to create a great outcome. So he's very, very good at what he does.
Yeah, I agreed. Completely agree there. So everyone, the guy's named Scott Mendelson. You can reach him at scott@infinityfitness.com. Send your questions his way, because as I said, he's more than welcome to hear from you guys. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was talking
Scott?
to Dr. Serrano the other day, and we're working on a new article on top natural testosterone boosting tips. And we'll have some training as well as nutrition information in there. So if you email me, I'll send it to you. It's not done yet, but I'm hoping to finish over the next couple of days. So if you email me, I'll be happy to send you, a free copy of that. I think there's a lot of stuff that'll interest the people that are looking, into this. And I can send you some other, videos that might interest you. Just tell me, what you're trying to do. I'm happy to send you a lot of different videos and articles on our website that you'll like. Again, I really like interacting with people. So don't hesitate to email me. There's no cost to email me. There's no strings attached. I'm happy to send you, free resources just to make this, a better society. So don't hesitate to email me.
Awesome. Well, Scott, I really appreciate the time, and it'd be great to have you on again. We maybe focus on one particular topic in detail. This was just kind of like an introductory, let the world know who Scott Mendelson is, at least on our channel.
Yeah, absolutely. People have questions, send them to you, and we can build a big question file, and then I can prepare, for, let's say a podcast in the future for specific questions, and maybe include some, training videos or something like that as well that we can, pop into the window too, that people will really like. Absolutely. I'm all for it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. So if all you viewers, if you haven't already subscribed, please click that subscribe button, click that bell button to get notified, because we're constantly uploading new stuff. We're going to get all kinds of really interesting guests on, like Scott. So that's it. Scott, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. It was very filled with a lot of practical advice, which is always great. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right.